These readings remind me of this very famous rabbi in the 17th century. I know he's probably a fan of yours. He's a fan of mine. And his name was the Baal Shem Tov. And it just means master of the holy name. And he was this incredible mystic and visionary in the 17th century. And the odd part was, as a rabbi, he was well-trained in theology, he was brilliant, and his problem was that when he would give theological lectures, people would be bored. It's shocking. And what he discovered is that really lecturing on theology didn't change the world whatsoever. And so how he decides to change is that he would just tell stories. And he told great stories. Now, the truth is, he was also an incredibly holy, mystical person. He actually changes Judaism. But all he would do is tell stories. And he tells us one story. He's renowned for his holiness. And he tells the story that he was always curious to meet the person he'd sit next to in the kingdom of God. Because, in the Bible, when you die, heaven is this great feast, right? So he prayed and prayed and prayed for years to find out who he'd sit next to. And he wanted God to tell him. And surprisingly, one day, God tells him who he's going to sit next to and where the guy lives. And so the rabbi, he travels to, actually it's Poland. And so if you're Polish, there is a chance you can get to heaven. He goes to Poland, and he knocks on this guy's door. And it's just the Sabbath is ready to go. He's knocking on the door, and the guy says, "Go away, it's night." And he says, No, we have to gather together. It's the first star is showing. We must say our prayers. The guy's not even a practicing Jew, not even Jewish. And he says, "Well, I need some place to celebrate the Sabbath." So the guy lets him in. And the guy, he opens the door, and the Baal Shem Tov says, he opened the door, and it was a huge man. He was so big, he had to bend down just to come outside the lintel of the door. He's just the biggest man he's ever seen. So the Baal Shem Tov invites him to pray with him. And he says, "No, I don't do that stuff." So the Baal Shem Tov thinks, okay, I'll just celebrate the Sabbath alone. Celebrates it, goes to bed, and it occurs to the Baal Shem Tov, and this, you have to know this in Judaism. In Judaism, it's called the righteous ones, that there are 36 people in the world that are so righteous, so holy, that their holiness can't be observed by ordinary people. So the Baal Shem Tov thinks, well, maybe he's one of the righteous ones. So the Baal Shem Tov stays up all night to see and what this guy would do. And around the house was all this food. Well, the guy did get up in the middle of the night to eat and then went back to sleep. So the Baal Shem Tov thought, well, maybe God gave me the wrong vision. I'm going to be sitting next to this guy? And so when the Baal Shem Tov leaves in the morning, he's just honest and tells him that God gave him the vision, that they would be next to each other at the great feast of the kingdom of God. And the Baal Shem Tov says, well, I have to ask you, why do you live this way? Why? And the guy tells him his story. He says, I'm the biggest man you've ever met. I eat a lot. I love to eat. And he says, but let me tell you, I grew up in Russia. And in our little village, I loved our childhood. But then the Cossacks came, and they burned down our village. Everybody was killed, except for me and my grandfather. And one day, I go down to the river to get some water, and I'm coming back, and the Cossacks came again. And they tied my grandfather to a tree, and they poured pitch on him. And they lit him on fire. And he says, my grandfather was just a wisp of a man. And he went up like that. He said, at that moment, I decided that when the Cossacks come back, and the Cossacks always come back, and when they tie me to the tree, that I will burn so bright and so long that they will be able to see their own sins. And the man starts to cry. And he starts to cry, and he says this prayer to God, "Oh God, change the hearts of your children who spend their lives hating each other in the name of God." He said, "Enlighten every heart that all people may love each other." And the guy is just crying. And the Baal Shem Tov said he slowly backed away. And the Baal Shem Tov said for the first time in his life, the Baal Shem Tov wondered if he was holy enough to sit next to this man. And the Baal Shem Tov tells this story that true holiness is this desire that all people be gathered together at the great feast. And sometimes the people you think are the least holy, in their heart burns the greatest desire for all mankind. You really don't know who's holy and not holy. So it said, just instead of running around trying to figure out who you'll be next to in the kingdom of God, make sure you spend your life striving to be the best you can, so that all people of all religions change their hearts to love each other. That's a Baal Shem Tov story. In a way, it's exactly like the readings. The first reading, it's beautiful. It tells the dream of God. Do you know what the dream of God is? The dream of God, just like the Baal Shem Tov, the dream of God is that one day when the Messiah comes, all people from the north and the south, the east and the west, from Lud and Put, and when it names all those names, those are enemies. That all these enemies will be drawn together at one table, one family of God, worshiping together. All these diverse people who normally would hate each other. It's like Green Bay fans and Vikings will finally get along at one table. And the dream of God is that all humanity, despite all our differences, we'll be gathered together as one family, seeing each other as brothers and sisters. That's the dream of God. I just think it's incredibly beautiful. And the line I like is all of us as one, but also, if you notice in the prophecy, when the Messiah comes, he'll draw all people to be one family. And even from the Gentiles, some will become priests. The priests in the temple did not like this prophecy because I do become a priest and I am a Gentile. And the dream of God is that all of us will look at each other as brothers and sisters. So the gospel is kind of the same point. The gospel, somebody comes up to Jesus, this voice. And the voice, you always hear the voice. And the voice is, how many are going to be saved? The voice really is saying, who's orthodox and who's not orthodox? That's what it's asking. And so the voice asks a question, and Jesus basically says, that's the wrong question to be asking. Jesus never answers that question. What he answers is not how many will be saved, but what are you doing? Instead of looking at other people, look at yourself. And he warns against this infighting for God. Have you ever noticed, like some people, you always have this voice that's trying to say who's in and who's out. Does that make any sense? And even, it sounds strange, there's this video clip that somebody sent me. It's on this Catholic website of this one priest. I give him credit. He really named a problem because he's a priest that just celebrates Mass in Latin. And he says to the congregation, he says, we have a problem in this parish. A lot of you people who come, and this priest is for celebrating Mass in Latin. He's very traditional. And he says, except I notice there's this arrogance among you, where you think because you celebrate Mass in Latin, you're better Catholics than those other Catholics. He said, that pride, it will destroy you. And he goes off. He's amazing. But he's right. A lot of times people in religion somehow think that they're better than everybody else. That's not where you should put your energy. You should put your energy in trying to love other people. And even the phrase, how many will be saved? Just have to explain this because this drives me up the wall. Has anybody ever said, are you saved? Do you know what that means? In the Greek, like in English, when you hear "are you saved," you kind of think, are you going to burn in hell or be in heaven? Which is it? That's actually not what the Greek means. At the Passover, to be saved means that you're set free so that you can be one family. In the Greek, if you're saved, then you're a citizen of the kingdom. It means to be saved really means to be one family. That's the dream of God. Anyhow, the problem is that sometimes the insiders in religion think that they're a little bit better than anybody else. And so Jesus says, strive for the narrow gate. I like the word strive. It means, you have to work at loving other people, especially if they're related to me. It takes a lot of work. You want to keep pushing and pushing and pushing yourself to love people more and more and more, rather than sit back and say, well, I think I'm saved and they're not. You want to push yourself. And then he tells this amazing parable where he tells the insiders in religion. He says, when you see the kingdom of God, you're going to be surprised because you'll see pagans sitting next to the patriarchs, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. People you least expect will be sitting right next to the holiest people. And you yourself, you who think you're inside in religion, you might be kicked out. And you'll knock on the door and God will say, love itself will say, I don't recognize you. You think you're an insider, but you're the furthest away from love. Not even love will recognize you. So strive for the narrow gate. And when he says narrow gate, it means the tough way. The easy way is the broad way. It's kind of like trying to get healthy. It's really easy to get unhealthy. Just eat Twinkies. The road is broad to becoming broad. Sorry, I was trying to make a play there. The narrow gate is, you have to exercise, and it's like being healthy. Same thing with love. Choose the narrow gate. Choose the tough way where you're pushing and pushing and pushing yourself to love. That's what we want to become. And I love the idea that, think about this. In the Eucharistic prayer, we're praying that all these people from different nations and nationalities, all of us are gathered together right now, right here, around one table, striving to love each other. To put the Eucharist into action means that we're pushing ourselves to try and look at each other as brothers and sisters. We're trying to carry out the dream that God has, that all people will be gathered together and look at each other as brothers and sisters. So, like the Baal Shem Tov, rather than spend our lives thinking that we're better than other people, why don't we spend our lives striving to really love other people? That's when we put the Eucharist and the kingdom of God into practice. And so, together, let us stand and profess our faith.